I fled the burning city. The inferno crept through the countryside as I made my way into the dark recesses of the forest which adjoined the remaining walls of the ruined Acropolis. Staggering, I crept along the undergrowth and bony limbs and roots of cankering trees. As I limped, the aching scars across my body began to crack as the cool shadows of the canopy gradually obscured the glowing wreckage to my rear. I leapt into the gloom. The dark enveloped me, and branches lashed at my face as I moved on. I fell. My pace quickened. Hundreds, thousands of tiny sticks impaled my bleeding wounds, and then a metamorphosis. The twigs changed into the legs of insects, and here a mantis hook, which grappled my way through the vegetable maze, pulling along with it my long centipede hulk, which felt to me now to extend far, far behind me. At last I could no longer move forward, and the branches reached in and tied me. My immobilization was total among the hostile trees, an insect in a web. An enormous solitary eye approached, and I began to fall, and as I fell I heard a voice that said, "Here." I was standing in a desert. My feet looked like the scaled claws of some reptile. Before me, the frank visage of an elder spirit's presence. His hand plunged knife-like into my torso, and at once I held in my glove-like hand the color blade, a hooked and jeweled dagger. Its lavender-emanated hues I had never known and filled the rings of the chainmail of scales which covered my body. I was Eeshcomon, the ram-headed champion of color. The color, every shade and chroma beyond imagination, each filled some nook or cranny previously obscured by the shadow, each like a little puzzle piece. The distinctions now filled my field of view, replacing and ripping through the whipping branches. The knife now revealed to me the path below my feet. The seer had disappeared. Like a whisper I had heard, through the trees and on by way of the color blade. And up the river and through the woods I went, and as I parted paths before my wake, a giant crimson snake flew above my head and transferred the sticks and underbrush of the forest into rowing mechanisms to slow the waves' turmoil. Up and up the flowing waters, the color blade led the way, and on my right I saw from the heights of the seeming origin of that flow, from the mountain peak from which the great river tumbled down, I saw again the obliterated body of that city, Ingora, in which I had awoken so recently, it seemed to me. But down and down again we went as the river rushed up and up the other side of the tallest mountain, and beyond I could see another peak, and further afar the infinite expanse of those woods in which I found myself. And down I went into the reaches of the valley between these two peaks, one mighty and tall, the other so small in the vast distance of space which now stretched out and down. And down I went into that valley, and as I fell down against the rush of that river water upward, I saw a worm, a larval centipede, thorny and armored, a great crustacean of the sky. It flew with thin wings, buzzing and soaring, lace wings and long pincers like a Dobson fly. It moved through the sky as if drifting on waves of the sea. Up and down went the continuous alternating curve of its flight, and suddenly I plunged into a mass of the millions of buzzing cousins of this brother worm. Teeming masses of these smaller worms created a cloud, an atmosphere around the valley. The color blade reflected hues in their red and yellow abdomens and turquoise emerald notes in their shimmering gossamer wings. I fell and landed in the valley of insects. The very ground itself shifted and morphed underfoot. Tiny creatures, ants, beetles, mantids, stinging wasps, and aphids, crawling millipedes seethed illusory. My feet held fast, and the scales of my hoofed toes prevented injury. And then I saw an army, a mass of soldiers marching in tip-toed suits of armor, and roaring above their heads a great worm flew carrying the leader of that force, a man I knew. I knew him somehow as Luna, the brother of the North, a magic maker and ruler of those lands. He carried a sword which curved and hooked at the tip, like my own blade. The weapon carved a grid of fire through the air and marked and captured the creatures it encountered, at once destroying and replicating them, enslaving the insect host and adding it to his army. Like a net, the perpetual flames engulfed a great monster, then another, and finally a moth, enormous, the greatest of them all, appeared over the distant hill of that further mountain, and it grew as it approached. Vast wings spread over the horizon, and a horrible clicking, the repetitive sound of shell knocking against cellulite mandible. The power of the great moth insect's call reverberated through every living creature among the mass of the ground and the air. The atmosphere rippled, and like lightning, the flying things of the air dove down, hitting the ground and adding to its flood-like pool of writhing living matter. The click shook through everything. The army, which I could see from my footholds further up the mountains, held fast and turned to face the approaching insect, mother of all. And Luna from his perch directed his magic hook, and the systems of fiery lines around him projected out, and I envisioned a blast, a great explosion of energy in the sky. And when I could again look out at the burning clouds, I saw the moth creature frozen in the air, and around it ripped the markings in space of Luna's magic. Eeshcomon's journey through the Angora forest from the flames of that city. Metamorphosis, the seer's gift, the colored blade, pickup sticks. The journey back up the snake and into the valley of insects. Simultaneously through the woods and witnessing Luna's desperate march south, and then the cutting branches of trees again, and only machinery to be seen. For he learns how this all works before being given the choice to exact his revenge. The senseless waste stretching out before you, and yet you decide to follow through and kill the moth of your imagination, bringing the spirit of your world ever closer to the beautiful strangeness of this one. For there is no answer. Your nature bleeds into my own. And next to that city, Angora, how it was, a pathway through that shimmering city and its temples, yellow and maroon, now and then to Zuarn and further to Zukanu, to see what great pillars of lightning harness the island king's power and the sound of white lightning striking, and to see the desert and its pyramids so strangely out of place in the empty waterless stretches of space. But why? For before the king of fate, mechanics deep in the dark forest to the north, here is your envy. Your aim is to steal the wretched amulet wherein he sleeps like a djinn in his lantern, keeps his soul, may rest and not wander from the source of his power. Steal the jewel, pupil. How he manipulated me, that king of fate, and wrought the amulet to transfer his sleeping soul out from my mechanical prison and through to the pyramid of the snake, that great spire that holds the liar's creature which he used to annihilate Ingora. So you sneak past the gate of hell and through the labyrinth and past those who guard me inside until you find the monster Kirkanix in his amulet around Eeshcomon's neck, emerging and slew the winged beast atop the pyramid's dark and dismal peak, and assumed his wicked seat there, and fate, that fickle fantasy, enslaved the creator of the pyramid's recessive throne. Luna masked himself and served the machine, and Eeshcomon was never again seen. The dung beetle rolls, and the click beetle sings on. It came to him in a vision. He closed his eyes, and then it was as though his eyelids had disappeared. He saw it in shifting dark masses without definite outlines. He could peer into its vast forms and thought he saw tiny trees among forests, little rippling waves among oceans, grains of sand blown by the wind along an orange desert. His eyes rolled over the surface of granite and desiccated salt fields like giant boulders, locking tumblers in a machine. He rolled over the surface like it was a map, a whole world turned face up and hung on a wall. He read in the dunes and the swirling foliage a language that spread out in branching facets and in all directions. Although the expanding script demanded innumerable interpretations, its meaning was unquestionable and undeniably clear to him. As he read, he knew that the script came from a singular being, connected by some force to his mind, yet retaining its own separate consciousness. The words or voice told a story which unfolded into his view. He saw creatures like the ones he knew, scaly legs, and creatures like insects that held deep forests on their necks. He held their shapes with his eyes like flat puzzle pieces. He moved closer to the vision which he saw now as a tangle of these animals, snakes, lizards, plant matter, with green fur and white eyes. Orange eagles' wings that contained distant electrical storms devolved into sand dunes. What I will show you now is not how my world really is. It does not appear to you like your world does. It is not possible to describe without recourse to elements of your understanding. It does not have shape or color, deserts, mountains, forests, or insects. These are recreations. These synonyms I use are inadequate in depicting the world where I come from. The world does not have souls or lips or heads or noses or eyes. The limits of your imagination take you only as far as these fragments of language. This fantasy world I will call Ingora. It does not have streets or telephone wires, or walls or houses or people. It is a city, and I will show it to you with long routes that its inhabitants walk, and dwellings which beings occupy. It is a made-up place which I have imagined as an alternative to the brick and cement buildings which you know. It is a utopia where those who live on the inside have solved by what you could call a kind of magic spell the problems with which you live during the days and nights on Earth. There is no night or daytime in Ingora. Those who live in this city do not have eyes or noses or mouths, but I will show them to you with features similar to these. You will have to imagine what they look like in reality for yourself. I will tell you that they see with their eyes the bright purples, scarlets, and yellows of the walls that glow with light on the shimmering streets of Ingora. The blankets of sky you will see above you appear black and turquoise. He awoke in the street. Sitting up, he saw the perfect scene of his kitchen at home. Through the window, the trees that might brush their leaves against the panes of glass. He saw his refrigerator, and, as his eyes adjusted, the microwave, sink, countertop, a cereal box. As he turned his head, he saw the yellow road stretching far, far into the distance. The yellow walls of the barren alleyway loomed several feet above his head. Some 30 or 40 feet away, the turret of a stone wall jutted upward, and a triangular banner flew above the tower. As his eyes turned skyward, the background faded from a dark turquoise to a deep, impenetrable blackness that for a moment transfixed and hypnotized him. He jerked his eyes back to look at the familiar view of his kitchen, and there was his refrigerator again, his microwave. Now, on closer inspection, the scene sank into a pattern. The edges were flat. His view rolled over the surface like a textile, and now new patterns emerged. Stars and geometric bands which he had not noticed before. Had he really been looking at a perfectly smooth tapestry just a moment before? He could not make out where his refrigerator had been. A still image of beautifully designed motifs hung before him like a rug. Indeed, he saw now that it was a rug, hanging from the second-story balcony. He brought himself up onto his knees from his sitting position and looked down the street in the other direction. A long way off was another structure like the tower to his right. It looked like a gate or archway, colored bright sandy yellow and a warm maroon in a checkerboard pattern. Atop its single-pointed peak, another long, thin banner draped off of a triangular frame. Looking at the banner, he saw a tiny pinhole in the center of the flag. The turquoise of the distant sky showed through it. The pinhole seemed to grow and shrink as though it were breathing. In the haze of this strange awakening, he felt as though the pink fluttering drape of the flag was close, and yet very far away. He thought he could almost touch it. Suddenly, the ground between him and the gate, as well as the gate itself, flag and all, began to shift. His whole field of view began to turn, rotating all the way around to face him. The ground before him sprung up, the gate seemed to accelerate towards him, and the pinprick of turquoise, once turned all the way around, revealed the other side of the banner. The perfect line drawing of a yellow eye with its center of blue-green. The eye blinked. Standing in front of him now stood some sort of person. The gate, which now stood 10 or so feet away from him, formed its torso, and what had been the 100 yards of dusty street now appeared as a pair of yellow legs. He did not hear the creature's voice, but in some way it spoke to him. "You are in fact not in your kitchen anymore," it said. "I will tell you what you need to hear," said the words that it spoke. "You are in Ingora." I wished it had said more, but with that, the gate and spire and street turned again and began walking back into the distance, leaving as it did bits of its feet and legs behind it, so as to recreate the street and building facades which faced it. There was nothing to do but get on my feet. I glanced again at the stunning rug hanging from the wall, and for the first time noticed the doors and windows that adorned the dwellings that made up the street front around me. The doors appeared to be made out of wood, but as I stared at their surfaces, their textures revealed themselves as complex patterns of interlocking spears and staves. The longer I looked, the more I thought to myself they looked like armies approaching one another, marching into battle. The windows, although open to the air, revealed only the same deep, mesmerizing blackness I had seen in the sky. Turning in the direction I had first peered, I made my way down the street. I walked faster and faster until the tower I had seen in the distance was far behind me. The street sloped upward gradually until I reached a peak. I thought I might see the city stretching out before me from the top of this eminence, but unfortunately the wall of stacked dwellings reached higher than my view. Beyond me I could only see the balconies of a few pillared halls, which were out of my reach. Directly in front of me, and down another rather steep incline, as if carved out of the face of sandstone, was a wall with more windows and a door at its base. It was the end of the road. I slid down the hill and stood in front of the tall, barred archway. There was no doorknob, but to the right of the door, hanging in the shadows, was a sign which read in plain English, "Knock." I knocked and the door opened. Inside was a bright, glowing yellow light which illuminated a tall figure. It looked like a person. Its body was made of pink and purple and yellow tubes which interlocked and broke off from one another. The tubes turned with the being's movement, so that whichever way I looked at them, they maintained a flat frontality in relationship to myself. The figure, whose legs, arms, and face were made out of the same pink and yellow tubes, had 2 eyes, one of which was about 2 inches lower than the other. "Yes," said the creature from what appeared to be a rather normal-looking mouth. I didn't say anything. The thing exited the house, closing the door behind it, and stood out in the street in front of me. "Yes," said the being again. "Yes," I repeated. "Ah," said the being, as if it now comprehended what was the matter with this uncomfortable foreigner on its doorstep. "Do you speak English?" it asked me. I paused. "Yes," I replied. Said the thing, still unsure. "Do you speak English?" it said slowly. I nodded my head. "Ah," said the thing. "Well, that's one mystery solved. At the very least, we can understand one another." I said nothing. "My name," said the creature, "is John. Listen. Listen carefully to what they say. Those things they tell you not to do those things." I stayed in the house for 17 days. Each day when I slept, In a side chamber in his home where lay a simple cot, John would recede into the wall above the fireplace. Sometimes I would watch as the smoke from the greenish flames would flow through the chimney and through the pipes in John's chest, which would become still and fuse together. And the fumes would heat a long, thin teapot that would rest always in a nook above his head. When I woke, John would open his own eyes and emerge from the wall, and the teapot would become unsteady and eventually crash to the floor, the green slime from its cracks snuffing out the magic fire. I ate only grapes, but wanted nothing else besides the occasional craving for ham and beans. The grapes grew from a vine that sprouted from a crack in the wall and rested with its bounty of green fruit on a table across from the fireplace. The rest of the room held only 3 chairs of sandstone carved out of the wall, each with the heads of mantis insects for their feet. In the center of the remaining walls of that singular room were a door each. One went out to the street from which I had come. The other led to my room. When I slept, I dreamed of insects eating grapes and laughing as my limbs changed to long tentacles. I lived without boredom and without anxiety, and it wasn't out of fear or discomfort that I eventually decided to leave the house, but rather a curiosity for this world I had fallen into, and a desire to once again get outside. It was the 17th time that I woke up in that bed, in that house with its shining yellow walls, that I opened my door and witnessed a trail of grapes jumping down from the table and in an uneven queue filed across the deep red clay floor and into the fire. I watched as the plant's entire bounty, which had until then obscured most if not all of its root, emptied now almost all at once onto the floor, and jumbled quite quickly and entirely into the flames, revealing not the thin vegetation of a vine, but rather a long, elegant stick insect, which proceeded to open a pair of gossamer, jewel-like wings. The insect flew in the blink of an eye into the fireplace and was gone. Facing the green flame, I looked up inquisitively at John. To my surprise, the pipe man had sunk into the wall itself, becoming like a golden bas-relief. Above him, the teapot tilted on its pedestal. I could tell that the porcelain assembled angels and ye powers returned from unsuccessful charge. Be not dismayed, nor troubled at these tidings from the earth, which your sincerest care could not prevent, foretold so lately what would come to pass when first this tempter crossed the gulf from hell. Section 1.